Welcome to this edition of Global Cruise Report. I'm Peter Greenberg. I'll be speaking to the world's leaders in the cruise industry, from CEOs to heads of operations, from the ports, design innovators, as well as updates on real-world conditions and what you can expect. It's been over a year since the cruise industry suspended operations due to COVID-19. During that time, cruise lines have been working with scientists and public health experts to establish and then build multiple layers of protocols and design changes to mitigate the risk of the virus. And many of these protocols have already been put to the test, primarily in Europe, where more than 350,000 passengers have resumed cruising on a limited, phased-in basis. Crisis management, crisis resilience, crisis communication. That's something that an organization in Europe called EU Healthy Gateways provides. So how to improve response capacities at points of entry in different countries. And in the last year, the organization has been working hard with cruise operators and ports in Europe, but how are they going to rewrite the playbook? How are they going to retune the manual and be responsible to the fast-changing global safety and health rules and protocols? I spoke with one of the members of EU Healthy Gateways, Christakis Hadjichristodoulou. He's the Vice President of the University of Thessaly School of Health Sciences. So tell me, if you can, how you got involved in this project. Obviously, 9 months ago, we weren't thinking about it. Now everybody's thinking about it. And so what did your work do to lead you to this?
I have to say that we started working with cruise ships from the Olympic Games in Greece. It was in 2021 when we were preparing that time to host the Olympic Games. And actually, we used 9 cruise ships as a floating hotels that time. And so we had to inspect them. And we started thinking about the European program. And we applied to the European Commission. And we received the first grant in 2006. And we started creating the European ship sanitation program, we call it.
When you did that sanitation protocol, when you came up with that system and the criteria, that really prepared you for what you're doing now.
That's correct. We faced a lot of outbreaks during this period, usually GI outbreaks on board the cruise ships. We also investigated Legionella outbreaks on cruise ships, and also we prepared guidance for influenza. And when the new coronavirus occurred, it was during January, and we were asked to operate in emergency mode. And then we started responding to requests. At that time, we realized the need of some extra guidance for the cruise ships. It was before the Princess Diamond event. It was just before. And we started preparing how to respond in one case or a cluster of outbreak aboard the cruise ship. And we published the interim guidance just the day before the incidents in Japan.
You learned from that experience how to respond. You published the paper, you published the directions, but have we now transformed into another protocol of how to anticipate?
Yes, we're working for a long time because during the first wave of coronavirus, almost all the cruise industry, they stopped operating, and then they have to restart after the first wave. So we started working on a very, very detailed protocol in order to achieve the restarting of the operation of the cruise industry. We set 10 prerequisites, and then a lot of other issues related to pre-embarkation screening of the passengers, measures on board, social distancing, the wearing of masks, also specific issues related to the crew members.
Such as?
Pre-embarkation testing, regular testing every at least 2 weeks. So a lot of issues were there decided and included in this guidance. As I told you before, 10 prerequisites. The most important is contingency planning, and not only of the ship, but also coordinate the contingency plan of the ship with the contingency plan of the port. So to be sure that if there is a need to disembark passengers, the port can support the ship in this outbreak management. We also recommended specific clean disinfection, specific issues related to the ventilation, specific also issues related to the avoiding of crowding, even in the restaurants or in let's say, theaters or whatever, all the activities. And we are going to modify and update the guidance.
So let me ask you this, Christos. When you mentioned modifying and updating it, give me an example of how fast you can move now to modify and update that guidance. Give me an example of that.
The protocol of testing of the passengers. Now there are more available rapid tests, antigen tests, and seems to be quite, the quality is better now. They're effective and seems to be the sensitivity and specificity quite acceptable. And for example, we may suggest instead of PCR testing before the embarkation of the passengers, 2 consequent tests with antigen tests with an interval for 3-4 days. This is an option. We're going to discuss it and maybe propose this instead of PCR testing, of having 2 serial tests with antigen tests with an interval of 3 or 4 days. For example, one just before embarkation and one on board the ship 3 or 4 days after the embarkation. So there are different issues that have to be updated according to the lessons learned from the past period when we started cruising in Europe.
What's been your biggest challenge as you're trying to implement these protocols in order to get everything done?
I think what you have said is very important. I think the other issue, as I told you before, with 10 prerequisites, I think the protocols of the cruise ships should be approved beforehand by the ports. The ship must have an agreement and they must share and exchange their protocols to see that their protocols, their contingency plans, they match and they're operating together. So
and is that happening now?
Not at the level we would like to happen.
What you need is a scalable solution.
The vaccine is also going to be included in what we're discussing about the operation of cruising in general.
And assuming that the vaccination is widespread, it's scalable, it's provable, that's your game changer.
It's going to be a change. It's going to be something that I have to take into consideration. But again, I think the measures are not going to be relaxed. So public measures, they should continue in the same way despite the vaccination. So especially at the beginning, even if
the combination of your existing protocols and game plan and the vaccination is the way forward.
In the future, yes, but definitely the strict protocols are the basis. And then if we add something else, it's an added value. But we're not going to abolish the strict public health protocols in any way, even if the vaccine is very effective. We must have in mind that the strict protocols, they should be followed, and we are not going to abolish the strict public health protocols in any case.
Because you've learned your lessons. You've learned.
That's correct. That's correct.
Christos, thank you so much for joining us.
Same to you.
From an economic perspective, the cruise industry can't be looked upon in a vacuum. It's not just the ships, but the ports that are dependent on revenue. And when it comes to those ports, there may be no better example than Naples. This Italian port closed during the pandemic, but it is now up and running. So what policy and infrastructure changes did they make? And how is it leading the way in port stewardship? My conversation with Tomaso Cognolato, the head of Terminal Napoli. Sustainability had a different definition before the pandemic. Now you have all the other items involved. You have health and safety, disinfectant, change of design, change of protocols, different boarding procedures, different disembarking procedures. So from a port management point of view, how are you working with the cruise lines to make that work and get ready for this?
During all the last spring and beginning of summer, we have several meetings, testing with cruise lines and obviously health authorities, both at national level and at local level, just trying to figure out how could it be the resume of the cruising in Italy and how we could manage it without increasing the level of infections or whatever.
So when you talk about the testing, Tomaso, give me an idea of what you were doing.
We were running tests with our employees and with our partners just to check out what could be the flow of the passengers, the testing area, what we had to do if we found someone which was positive, trying to figure out how to separate the flows coming out from the vessel or going into the vessel, and trying to match all the things that we usually do in the best ways possible, maintaining the distances between one person and the other, so avoiding gatherings, and trying to figure out all the measures that we have to put in place in case of one case positive, two case positives, or something else.
It's not just coming off the ship, it's what they do on the buses, how they walk around the city, how do you maintain social distancing? So what did you learn from those tests?
But we learned that we have to create, let me say, something like a bubble where everything was under control. So all the people inside the bubble were tested, were sane, let me say, without any kind of problem. And we tried to maintain this bubble inside the vessel, inside the terminal, and as much as possible outside the terminal during the excursions.
And you're also practicing, I suppose, capacity controls, because you weren't taking 6,000 passengers at a time. It was a reduced number.
No vessels have the maximum capacity of people on board. They are running something like no more than 60% or 70%. And also inside the terminal, we have limited numbers of people allowed together. We have to respect the 4 square meters for each person of distancing between one person and the other. So we are trying to keep a limited number in the same hall together in the same time.
I'm suspecting that we may get to a point where it'll become stated policy of cruise lines that you cannot even board a ship until you've been vaccinated.
Maybe yes or maybe not. But the importance of the vaccine is not only for healthy reasons that are obviously, but also for confidence of the people and to be more optimistic about our future and to go back again to our old life in a short way.
In the port, what have you had to do to physically change your infrastructure to allow for the testing, to allow for social distancing, to allow for isolating someone who might test positive without jeopardizing the rest of the passengers or the rest of the cruise?
We have made many changes also because our terminal is quite particular, because inside our terminal, we run obviously cruising operations, but we have also offices. We have a mall with many shops. We have an hotel inside the terminal, and we have a congress center. What we have to do is to create a separate flow of access to the terminal to divide all the people. We had to dedicate specific halls, area, or rooms to embarking procedure and to disembarking procedures, just to avoid that the people that are embarking can mix with excursions or other passengers or other people that do not have to go on the board, on the vessel. And so the most important thing is that we had to find and dedicated isolated rooms for specific operations and divide the flows of the passengers and the people inside and outside of the terminal.
It's hard to think that last year those rooms were selling refrigerator magnets, and this year, year it's a whole different deal, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. What we are saying is that our only profit is the the smile on the face of passengers and on the terminal staff operators, first of all, because they are back again to the work. So the only profit for us is their smile on the face. No other profit in this period, but also for the cruising vessel, obviously there are no profit at all, but only expenditure. But we have to run the business to be back again as soon as possible. That's the important thing.
Working with the cruise lines, Tomaso, what's the biggest lesson that you learned going through all of this?
Well, for the first time, I think that before the pandemic, let me say, we were on the opposite side of the table. They were looking for best prices, best opportunities, best pier and whatever. And we were looking to have more and more vessels, more and more calls a year. After the pandemic and during the pandemic, we are on the same side of the table. We are working together because obviously the terminal without the vessel cannot do anything, and also the vessel without the terminal cannot do anything. Probably for the first time, even though we have talked many times about we are the same family, we work together, etc. This time we are really working together, trying to get off this period and to survive this period. They are losing money, we are losing money, but together we are still on the market, we are still running the business, and we are comfortable that in a short time, let me say in about 1 year, 1.5 years, we will be back again to the numbers of 2019, something like that.
I'm Peter Greenberg. I'll see you next time on another edition of Global Cruise Report.